All right, let's talk strategy. Specifically, we're going to get into the strategist's playbook and figure out why so many big, ambitious plans just fizzle out. And more importantly, we'll talk about how you can make sure your plans don't meet the same fate. So let's just start with a number that should honestly stop you in your tracks. 70 to 90%. Get this, that is the failure rate for most corporate strategies. Yeah, you heard that right. The huge majority of plans that are cooked up in boardrooms, the ones with millions of dollars behind them, they just don't work.
So, the obvious question is, why? I mean, how is that even possible? Are they all just bad ideas? Is it a string of bad luck? Or is there something much, much deeper going on here? That's exactly what we're going to dig into.
So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to tackle the main reason why most strategies fail. Then, we'll build out a blueprint for what success actually looks like. From there, we'll talk about closing the gap between the plan and the reality. Then, we'll get into how AI is completely changing the rules, learn a few things from the giants, both the wins and the losses, and finally, we'll put it all together into a playbook you can actually use.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of the problem. It's usually not that the idea itself is bad. No, the real weak spot for most companies is something called the execution gap. So what is the execution gap? Well, think of it as this giant canyon between a brilliant plan on a PowerPoint slide and what your employees are actually doing on a Tuesday afternoon. It's that space where a really clear, powerful vision gets totally lost in translation and just never becomes reality. And this isn't just a minor hiccup, it's a deep structural failure.
Okay, so if we're going to fix this, we have to go all the way back to square one. I mean, what even is a strategy? Before we can talk about making one work, we have to really understand what it's made of. And this is maybe one of the most important distinctions you can learn. See, operational management is all about efficiency, doing things the right way. But strategic management, that's about effectiveness, doing the right things to begin with. You can be the most efficient company on the planet at climbing a ladder, but if that ladder is leaning against the wrong wall, it just doesn't matter. So here's a really simple but powerful way to think about it, the VOSIC framework. It's pretty straightforward. You start with your vision. What's the big dream? Then you formulate a strategy. What's your actual theory for how you're going to win? Then comes implementation. Okay, how do we make this thing real? And finally, correction and control. How do we check in and make sure we're not drifting off course? Every good plan at its core follows this path.
All right, blueprint in hand. Now for the main event. How do we actually close that massive execution gap and turn a piece of paper into action?
You've probably heard this quote a million times, and there's a good reason for that. Peter Drucker absolutely nailed it. This phrase captures the single biggest obstacle to getting things done. You can have the most brilliant, data-driven strategy in the world, but if it runs counter to your company's culture, the real unwritten rules of how things actually work, your culture is going to win every single time. And beyond culture, that execution gap gets wider because of a few classic mistakes. First up, you've got the leadership gap. The visionary leader who loves the big idea but is completely disconnected from the messy reality of making it happen. Then there's the resource gap, launching a massive plan with a tiny budget. Next, my personal favorite, initiative overload, where you just keep piling new top priorities on top of the old ones. And finally, the feedback gap, where you basically wait a full year to check the scoreboard and see if you're winning.
And this slide just nails that feedback problem. See, most companies are obsessed with lagging indicators like annual revenue. But that's like trying to drive a car by only looking in the rearview mirror. It tells you exactly where you've been, but it tells you nothing about the massive curve up ahead. The smartest companies, they focus on leading indicators, things like customer happiness, that actually predict where you're going. It lets them steer the car before they hit the wall.
So how do you actually fix this alignment problem? Well, one of the most powerful tools out there is the OKR framework. You've probably heard of it. It was made famous by places like Google. OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results. And its genius is that it's a system for connecting the CEO's highest level goals all the way down to what every single team and every person is focused on day to day. It makes sure everyone is pulling in the same direction.
Okay, now, let's throw a huge wrench into everything we've just discussed. Because right now, all these old rules are being rewritten by technology. We're in the AI era now, and strategy is a whole new ballgame.
This is a really crucial shift in thinking. For decades, the whole point of strategy was to build what's called a sustainable competitive advantage. Basically, a deep, wide moat around your business that no one could cross. But today,
Technology moves so fast that those moats don't last. So the new goal is what we call transient advantage. It's the ability to create and then cash in on a whole series of temporary advantages, one after another after another.
And the engine driving this crazy new pace is something called Agentic AI. Now, we are not talking about a simple chatbot here. These are AI systems that can take action on their own. Seriously, think of them like digital coworkers that can look at a problem, decide what to do, and then go execute the entire task without a human telling them what to do next.
And if you think this is all just futuristic hype, just look at JP Chase. They've gone all in on AI, and the results are staggering. In the areas where they've fully deployed it, they're seeing a 30 to 40% annual return on their investment. This is proof that AI isn't just a buzzword, it's a core strategic weapon.
All right, enough theory. Let's make this real. Let's look at what happens when strategy goes right and when it goes spectacularly wrong, with some real-world stories from some of the biggest companies out there.
First up, Disney. Just a few years ago, they were facing a huge creeping problem. The whole blockbuster movie model, especially with franchises like Marvel, was starting to show cracks. People were getting Marvel fatigue, and the massive cost of making these movies was getting riskier and riskier.
So what did they do? They executed a massive strategic pivot. They started shifting from that risky, hit-driven business to a more stable, recurring revenue model. That meant pouring huge amounts of money into things like live sports rights for ESPN and building out their streaming bundles. The lesson here is so important. Great strategists know when it's time to walk away from the thing that made you successful in the past in order to survive in the future.
Okay, next up, Walmart. Their whole strategy is built on being the low-cost leader. To defend that against Amazon, they went all in on Agentic AI. They built what they call a self-healing supply chain. And get this, their AI can now predict a surge in demand for something in, say, Florida, and autonomously reroute trucks full of that product from another state to meet that demand without a single human having to approve it. It's incredible.
But for every brilliant move, there's a cautionary tale, and this is a big one. Let's look at what happened with X, the company we all knew as Twitter. In a very aggressive move to cut costs, the new leadership basically gutted the company's trust and safety teams. The result was predictable, and it was catastrophic. They completely alienated the one group that actually paid the bills, the advertisers. Revenue just fell off a cliff. The lesson here is painful but simple. You have to understand what parts of your business are truly core versus which are just costs. They thought trust and safety was an expense, but it was actually a core part of the product for advertisers. Misidentify that, and you can destroy your own company.
Okay, let's bring it all home. We've seen the theories, we've seen the tech, we've seen the wins and the losses. So what does this all mean for you? How do you take all of this and build an actual playbook you can use as a leader?
Here it is, your checklist for the future. First, stop thinking in static 5-year plans. Your strategy needs to be a living document that you revisit and refresh every quarter. Second, you have to link that big strategy to people's daily work using something like OKRs. Third, get obsessed with leading indicators. See the future, don't just analyze the past. Fourth, start building Agentic AI into your processes to create real advantages. And finally, use scenario planning to get ready for the shocks you know are coming. And that really brings us to the last and maybe most important point. All of these ideas, they don't just apply to giant faceless corporations. Your career, that's the ultimate strategic project. You have a vision for yourself, you have limited resources, and you are absolutely in a competitive environment. So after all this, the real question I want to leave you with is this. What's your first move?